Elvis Presley's granddaughter, Riley Keough, is opening up about her plans for Graceland and a promise to her mother.
There is a staircase at Graceland that no tourist has ever climbed. No camera has ever captured it. No journalist has ever been invited past it. For 47 years, the second floor of the most visited private home in America has sat in absolute silence, sealed, untouched, and deliberately hidden from the world. Below it, millions of fans have walked through rooms full of gold records, rhinestone jumpsuits, and vintage Cadillacs. They have stood in the jungle room. They have visited the meditation garden. They have laid flowers at the grave. But every single one of them has been stopped at the foot of that staircase and told, gently but firmly, that what lies above is not for public eyes. Until now, Riley Keough, actress, granddaughter of Elvis Presley, and the woman who now legally owns Graceland, has begun to speak. Not in a tell-all memoir, not in a press junket interview, but in carefully chosen moments, she has started pulling back the curtain on a part of her family story that has never been told publicly. What she has shared is not sensational. It is something far more powerful than that. It is intimate. It is honest. And for anyone who has ever truly wondered who Elvis Presley was behind the sequins and the screaming crowds, it is absolutely riveting. So today we're going to walk through everything Riley has revealed, the rooms, the artifacts, the emotional weight of what is preserved up there. And we're going to ask the questions that her words have quietly raised. What was Elvis protecting by keeping that floor sealed? What did he leave behind? And what does it mean that the woman who holds the keys has finally decided to use them, at least in part? Let's begin at the place where this story has always lived, Graceland itself. Most people know Graceland as a landmark, a pilgrimage site, the kind of place where grown adults weep at the gate before they even walk inside. But it did not start as any of that. When Elvis Presley purchased the property in 1957, he was 22 years old, newly famous in a way that American culture had never quite produced before, and desperately seeking somewhere he could breathe without a flashbulb going off in his face. The house itself was unpretentious by the standards of what it would later become. Built in 1939 in a colonial revival style, it had clean lines, white painted brick, and a gentle dignity that fit the Tennessee countryside around it. It was not a mansion in the Hollywood sense. It was a home, one that happened to sit on 13.5 acres of land far enough from downtown Memphis that Elvis could, for a time, pretend the rest of the world did not exist. He transformed it immediately and continuously over the next 2 decades. The famous shag-carpeted jungle room, with its waterfall and carved wooden furniture, was added in the 1970s and doubled as a recording studio. The racquetball court was built. The trophy room expanded. Cars filled the carport. Peacocks wandered the grounds for a period. The house grew outward and inward simultaneously, becoming a physical expression of a man who was equal parts extravagant and deeply private. But the second floor, Elvis's personal domain, was always different. Visitors to Graceland today walk through a house that is theatrical by design. The downstairs rooms were meant to be seen. They were decorated with an almost performative boldness. The second floor, however, was where Elvis actually lived. It was where he slept, read, prayed, worried, and eventually died. It was not designed for an audience. And that distinction has always mattered to the Presley family. When Elvis passed away on August 16, 1977, his father Vernon Presley made an immediate decision that the upper level of the house would be preserved exactly as it was. Not as an exhibit, not as a tribute, simply as it was, as if the owner had just stepped out and might return at any moment. That decision has held for nearly half a century. To understand why Riley Keough's revelations carry such significance, you have to understand what she inherited, and it is not simply a piece of real estate. Riley is the daughter of Lisa Marie Presley and musician Danny Keough. She grew up knowing that her grandfather was not a normal grandfather. His face was on billboards. His voice came out of jukeboxes. Strangers cried when they talked about him. But for Riley, Graceland was also just a house, the house where her mother grew up, where family gathered, where certain rooms were spoken about in hushed tones and others were completely off limits. After Lisa Marie Presley passed away in January 2023 following a cardiac arrest, the estate transferred to Riley. She was suddenly responsible not just for a family home, but for a cultural institution, one with licensing agreements, museum operations, archival collections, and a global fan base that monitors every decision made in Elvis's name with the intensity of a devoted congregation. Riley has handled this role with a quietness that surprises people. She does not grandstand. She does not court controversy. She has rejected numerous offers to dramatize or commercialize her family story in ways she feels would be exploitative. But she has also slowly and deliberately begun to share. And the subject she has chosen to share about, the sealed second floor of Graceland, is the most sensitive territory of all. In various interviews and public conversations since inheriting this estate, Riley has spoken about the upper level of Graceland with a specificity that no one outside the immediate family has ever offered before. She has described it as a place where time stopped, not metaphorically, but practically. The rooms have not been significantly altered since 1977. Elvis's personal belongings remain where he left them. His books are still on the shelves. His reading glasses are still on the nightstand. The clothes in his closet are still arranged as they were. For Riley, walking through that space is not like visiting a museum. It is like stepping into the final chapter of a person's life and finding every page still open. One of the spaces she has spoken about most movingly is Elvis's personal study, a small, wood-paneled room that served as his private retreat for reading and writing. Elvis was a voracious and eclectic reader. His library reflected a mind that was constantly searching. Books on Christian theology, numerology, Eastern spiritual traditions, philosophy, and biography filled the shelves. He was not simply curious, he was hungry. Fame had given him everything except the answers he was actually looking for, and he looked for them in books. Alongside those books, Riley has described personal notebooks, diaries essentially, though Elvis would probably never have called them that. Written in his own hand, they contain reflections on faith and doubt, entries that read like prayers, passages that read like desperate questions. She has described the tone of some pages as erratic, unfinished lyrics alongside philosophical fragments, alongside what sounds like the interior monologue of someone who was genuinely wrestling with who he was beneath the performance of who the world needed him to be. One detail Riley mentioned has lodged itself in the collective imagination of everyone who heard it. A single page on which Elvis had written one word over and over, filling the entire sheet. The word was free, with a question mark. No context. No explanation, just that word, repeated, as if writing it enough times might make it become true, or might answer what it even meant. Beyond the study, Riley has alluded to objects throughout the upstairs rooms that offer insight into her grandfather's inner life, sometimes painfully so. Elvis's bedroom, she has said, is preserved with an almost sacred exactness. The bed remains dressed in its original linens. On one nightstand, a Bible sits with handwritten annotations in the margins, Elvis's own theological commentary, his personal argument with Scripture. On the other nightstand, there were prescription bottles. Some, she noted quietly, were still full. That detail alone says something that a biography could spend 3 chapters trying to articulate. Tucked beneath the bed, Riley found a shoebox. On the lid, in Elvis's handwriting, were the words "Do not open." She opened it. Inside were letters, unsent. Some were addressed to specific people. One was addressed to Lisa Marie, Elvis's daughter, who was 9 years old when he died. Another bore no name. It was addressed, simply, to whoever might find it after he was gone. Riley has not shared the contents of these letters publicly, and she has been clear that she does not intend to. But she has acknowledged they exist, and she has said that reading them changed how she understood her grandfather. Not as a celebrity, not as a cultural icon, but as a man, one who had things he wanted to say and could not find a way to say them while he was alive. Perhaps the most surprising revelation Riley has made concerns a space that does not appear in any official Graceland documentation, any fan account, or any authorized history of the estate. She calls it simply the quiet room. Located at the far end of the upstairs hallway, This was a small space Elvis designed specifically for meditation and private reflection. It was not grand. Low lighting, cushions on the floor, a sound machine that generated a soft ambient hum. No television, no phone, nothing from the outside world. Elvis went there to pray, she says, or simply to sit with himself in the silence that his life almost never offered him. This room has never been photographed. It has never been mentioned in any interview by any staff member or confidant. Until Riley spoke about it, the room simply did not exist in the public record. And yet it may be the most honest portrait of Elvis Presley that Graceland contains, a man so consumed by his public existence that he built himself a secret room just to experience the sensation of not being observed. The natural question people ask is why Riley has chosen to speak about these things now, after decades of family silence. The answer she has given is layered. Part of it is grief. The loss of her mother, Lisa Marie, who was the primary guardian of this private legacy, left Riley not just with a property, but with a responsibility she had not fully anticipated. Lisa Marie had a complicated and deeply emotional relationship with Graceland and with her father's memory, one that combined love with grief, pride with pain. She kept the upstairs sealed in part because opening it, even in conversation, was simply too hard. Riley, a generation removed, carries the grief but from a different angle. She did not lose a parent at 9 years old. She did not grow up in the immediate shadow of that loss in the same way. And so she has been able to approach the subject with slightly more emotional distance, enough to speak about it, even if not enough to open those rooms to cameras. But she has also been clear about what she is not doing. She is not releasing these stories for commercial gain. She is not building a docuseries around them. She is not auctioning access to the upstairs or turning her grandfather's private life into a product. What she seems to be doing is something more deliberate and, frankly, more respectful. She is choosing to give the public an emotional understanding of who Elvis was without sacrificing the physical privacy of the spaces where he lived that truth. Some spaces are meant to stay personal, she has said, but that doesn't mean they have to stay secret forever. There is a broader conversation happening around Riley's revelations, one that extends beyond Graceland's walls and into the question of how we understand Elvis Presley in 2025 and beyond. Elvis died at 42. He was, by almost any measure, a man in crisis in his final years, isolated, unwell, searching for peace in a life that had long since become unmanageable. The caricature of Elvis as a sequin-suited figure eating peanut butter sandwiches in his mansion is one that has done real damage to public understanding of who he actually was. He was also a man of genuine spiritual depth, unusual intellectual curiosity, and enormous emotional sensitivity, qualities that were rarely celebrated during his lifetime and have been frequently overshadowed since. What Riley is doing in her quiet, careful way is restoring some of that complexity. The notebooks she describes, the meditation room, the unsent letters. These are not the artifacts of a man who had checked out of his own life. They are the artifacts of a man who was still very much trying to understand it, right up to the end. She is also, in a subtle way, changing how Graceland functions as a cultural site. For decades, visitors have come to see Elvis as an icon, to stand in the rooms where the legend lived. Riley seems to want them to leave understanding something more. She has spoken about educational partnerships, archival preservation, and the importance of situating Elvis within a serious scholarly conversation about American music, race, cultural identity, and the cost of celebrity. This is not a radical rebranding. It is a deepening, and it seems long overdue. Despite everything Riley has shared, the upstairs of Graceland will not be opening to visitors. She has been unambiguous about this. The bedroom where Elvis slept will remain private. The bathroom where he died, a space she has described with great care and even greater restraint, will not be turned into a stop on a tour. She has declined to describe that room in detail at all, saying only that it has never been altered and that the family treats it with the reverence one would give to any place where someone you love died. She is making a distinction, one that matters, between sharing stories and surrendering privacy. She can speak about what she found in that shoebox without displaying the shoebox. She can tell the world that a meditation room exists without filming it. She can honor the public's connection to Elvis without converting every inch of his private life into content. In an era when privacy has become almost commercially inconceivable, when the pressure to monetize, document, and share every experience is essentially relentless, there is something genuinely striking about this position. Riley Keough is the guardian of one of the most commercially valuable private spaces in the world, and she is choosing not to exploit it. That choice itself says something worth paying attention to. At the heart of all of this, the locked rooms, the unsent letters, the quiet room at the end of the hall, is something very simple. A granddaughter who never got to know her grandfather, trying to find him in the only places he left pieces of himself. Elvis Presley died 2 years before Riley was born. She has spent her life inheriting a legacy she had no hand in building and managing a grief she inherited secondhand. The second floor of Graceland is, in some ways, the closest she can get to the man himself. Not the performance of him, not the mythology of him, but the human being who sat in a small room with cushions on the floor and tried, in the only silence he could find, to figure out what it all meant. What she has found up there, she says, is not what she expected. She expected artifacts. She found a person. And perhaps that is the most important thing she has given the world with these revelations. Not access to a place, but access to a truth. Elvis Presley was not just the king of rock and roll. He was a man who kept letters he could not send, wrote words he could not say, and built himself a secret room just to experience the luxury of being no one for a little while. The staircase at Graceland is still off limits. The rooms are still sealed. But the silence up there is no longer quite as complete as it used to be. And that, for now, is enough. If this story moved you, share it with someone who loves Elvis, or someone who has never understood why so many people do. Like and subscribe for more stories that go beyond the legend and find the person underneath.